I arrived early for my in-laws' Christmas Eve party, hoping to surprise them. The moment I walked through the front door, I heard my husband's voice coming from the living room. "We're pregnant. We're having a baby boy." I stopped dead in the hallway. I wasn't pregnant. I peeked into the room and saw him with his arm around his ex-girlfriend. Everyone was applauding, cheering, and every person present knew the secret but me. But it wasn't just a betrayal. It was far worse than that. Over the next few weeks, I discovered that my entire life had been a lie, planned down to the smallest detail. They had no idea who they were truly messing with. I used to believe that knowing someone your entire life meant really knowing them, that a shared history was synonymous with trust, and that family was forever. I was wrong about all of it. My name is Zuri Sterling. I'm 28 years old, and I'm a senior project manager at a major tech firm in Atlanta, Georgia. From the outside, my life looked perfect. A beautiful condo, a stable marriage, a fast-rising career. People envied me, thinking I had it all, but they had no idea what I had been through to get there. They didn't know the price I had paid for that apparent stability. My life changed on Christmas Eve last year. That was when the blindfold finally fell away. The betrayal had been there for years, right under my nose. I simply couldn't see it. Let me rewind a little. You need to understand how I reached that moment. I've known Silas since the day I was born. Our parents were close friends, the kind who spent weekends together, took vacations, and celebrated every birthday. My parents were Silas's godparents, and his parents, Auntie Nyala and Uncle Kwesi, were mine, whom I affectionately called my aunt and uncle. It was the kind of friendship that seemed indestructible, built over decades. We grew up playing in the same parks. We saw each other at weekend cookouts, birthday parties, and Juneteenth celebrations. He was a part of my life even before I understood what that meant. But our lives were different, very different. My parents had money. My father was a successful real estate developer. My mother was a renowned architect. I went to the best private schools in the Buckhead area. I had piano lessons, ballet, and French classes. We traveled to Europe for holidays. We had a large, custom-built home. Silas, on the other hand, attended public schools. His family lived in a simple house in a middle-class subdivision outside the city limits. Uncle Kwesi worked as a manager at a Home Depot store. Auntie Nyala was a secretary at a medical practice. They lived comfortably, but without extravagance. At the time, I didn't fully grasp those differences. We were just kids playing together. But looking back now, I can see the signs. The way Auntie Nyala looked at my mother's fine jewelry, how Uncle Kwesi made comments about our house, our Escalade, our trips, always with a smile, always disguised as a joke. But there was something there, a sharp edge of bitterness that I was too young to recognize. When I was 16, my parents were killed in a car accident. It was a rainy October night. They were returning from an anniversary dinner, and an 18-wheeler lost control on the interstate. I won't pretend I have the words to describe that period. I don't. Even now, 12 years later, a part of me remains paralyzed at the exact moment the police knocked on the door at 2 a.m. After the funeral, Auntie Nyala and Uncle Kwesi moved into my house. They came to live with me so I wouldn't be alone. I was underage, orphaned, and completely lost. They took me in. They were kind. They made sure to tell me I would always have family. At the time, that saved me. Or so I thought. They managed my parents' estate until I turned 21. When I reached legal adulthood, I discovered my parents had left me a considerable fortune. 4 rental properties and the house we lived in, all completely paid off. My parents had invested wisely, planning for the future they never got to live with me. Auntie Nyala and Uncle Kwesi helped me with all the documentation, patiently explaining every detail and answering all my questions. When I turned 21 and could technically take charge of everything, they asked if they could continue living in the house with me. They said it would be better for everyone if we stayed together. I didn't think twice. They were practically my family. They had cared for me during the worst years of my life. Letting them stay was the least I could do. Generosity, gratitude, naivety, 3 words that perfectly define who I was back then. Silas and I started dating when I was 21. It felt natural. Everyone expected it. "You're perfect for each other," they'd say. "You grew up together. It's like destiny." He was attentive, affectionate, and seemed to understand me. He knew my history, my pain, my fears, or so I believed. 2 years later, we got married. Auntie Nyala helped me organize everything. We chose the gown together. She went with me to fittings. She gave her opinion on the flowers, the decor, the invitations. "Your mother would love being here, doing this with you," she told me several times, tears in her eyes. I truly believed she missed my mother, that she was filling that void out of love. On the wedding day, it was Uncle Kwesi who walked me down the aisle. He took my arm, looked at me with that paternal smile, and said, "Your daddy would be so proud of you today." I cried, thinking it was beautiful, that it was family love, and I allowed it because I trusted, because I believed it was genuine love. Silas and I moved into one of the condo units I had inherited. Silas said he wanted us to build our lives together, that we didn't need a huge house. It made sense at first. I worked a lot, focused on my career. He had started working as a day trader, operating from home, investing in stocks and crypto. At least that's what I thought he was doing. The other 3 properties were rented out. Silas offered to handle everything. "You work so hard. Let me manage the properties so you can focus on your career and I'll take care of this side." It seemed like a fair deal. He'd send me monthly reports. He claimed he was reinvesting the profits, multiplying our assets. I never questioned it. I trusted him completely. After all, why would I be suspicious? He was my husband. He had grown up with me. His parents were my godparents. They lived in my home. We were family. 2 weeks before Christmas, Silas came home with a document. It was a power of attorney prepared by an attorney who worked with his family. "It's just to make things easier, babe," he explained, smiling in that way that always reassured me. "This way, I can renew rental leases without bothering you at work, resolve bank issues, and handle recording matters. You'll be free to focus only on your job." I took the document and skimmed it quickly. Legal jargon always gave me a headache. "I'll read it calmly later," I replied. I saw something cross his face. It was quick, almost imperceptible, a clench in his jaw, a different glint in his eyes, but he quickly smiled again. "Sure, no problem, whenever you have time." I put the power of attorney in a desk drawer and honestly almost forgot about it. Work was a disaster. The firm had a massive project to close before the end of the year, and I was coordinating the entire team. The company holiday party was scheduled for the evening of December 24th. It started at 6 p.m., and I had agreed with Silas that I would leave around 10 to head to his parents' house, where the traditional family Christmas Eve dinner would be held. It was always like this. Every Christmas Eve, the house that had belonged to my parents was filled with Silas's extended family, friends, people I barely knew. I always went, always smiled, always felt grateful to be included because I still believed I was lucky to have that family. That night, the company party was a bit dull. Repetitive conversations, music too loud, drunk people talking about their New Year's resolutions. Around 8 o'clock, I decided to leave early and surprise Silas, arriving ahead of schedule to help with the final preparations. I drove home listening to gospel carols on the radio. It was cold and a light drizzle was falling. The streets were decorated with lights blinking in every window, that atmosphere of forced happiness that Christmas always brings. When I parked in front of the house, I realized it was packed. Cars were everywhere, lights were on in every room, and music and laughter spilled out onto the street. The party was already in full swing. I walked in the front door without knocking. I hung my coat in the entryway and headed toward the living room. The voices grew louder as I approached. I estimated there were about 20 people laughing and celebrating, and then I heard Silas's voice from the living room, clear and beaming. "Marielle is pregnant. We're having a baby boy." The world stopped. I stood there in the hallway, partially hidden by the wall. No one had seen me arrive. From my angle, I could see the entire living room. Silas was in the center of the room with his arm around Marielle. Marielle was a friend from high school, his teenage ex-girlfriend. They had dated for years before Silas and I started seeing each other. And there she was, smiling with a hand on her belly, receiving hugs and kisses from everyone. Auntie Nyala was crying tears of joy. Uncle Kwesi was applauding and shouting. Friends and family offered toasts, saying things about how handsome the baby would be. I felt my legs give out. I leaned against the wall to keep from falling. Someone in the crowd yelled, "But what about Zuri? Does she know yet?" The silence that followed lasted barely 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Silas managed a somewhat forced smile. "Not yet. I need to sort out a few things first. Some documents. But I'll tell her at the right time. So nobody here says a word when she arrives." Everyone laughed. My heart pounded. Documents. He was talking about the power of attorney. There was a murmur of understanding in the room. Some people exchanged knowing glances. Auntie Nyala nodded as if approving the strategy. Uncle Kwesi raised his glass to the future and everyone toasted. In that moment, everything began to make sense. The way they reacted, those looks, that loaded silence, everyone in that room knew something I didn't. There was a secret, a conspiracy, and the power of attorney was the final piece of the plan. My stomach churned. It wasn't possible. I must have been hearing wrong. But Auntie Nyala, my godmother, said loud and clear, "Finally, my son, after all these years, we're going to reclaim what is rightfully ours." And then I understood everything. Every smile, every affectionate gesture, every word of comfort. It had all been a lie. A big, elaborate lie that had been going on for years. It wasn't love. It never was. It was a con. I turned around, grabbed my coat, and slipped out of the house as silently as I had entered. No one saw me. No one noticed. I got into my car, closed the door, and only then did the full reality hit me. I started to cry. Not the melodramatic movie cry, but a silent, painful weeping that burned my chest and throat. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to process what I had just witnessed. My marriage was a farce. My husband had a pregnant mistress. Auntie Nyala and Uncle Kwesi, my godparents, were involved in a scheme to steal my inheritance, and everyone, absolutely everyone in that room, knew and was in on it. I drove back to the condo on autopilot. I don't remember the road. I don't remember stopping at traffic lights. I only remember crying and driving, crying and driving. When I got home, I wiped my tears, washed my face, looked in the mirror, and barely recognized the person staring back. I looked smaller, more fragile, lost. My cell phone vibrated. It was a text from Silas asking where I was. I took a deep breath and replied, "Decided to stay at the company party. It's more lively than I thought." He replied, "Okay, have fun. See you in 2 weeks. We're leaving early tomorrow for the Caribbean." Of course, the annual trip. Since we got married, his family always visited relatives in the Caribbean for Christmas and stayed until the first week of January. They knew New Year's was always chaos at my firm, project closures, reports. Every year I stayed while they went away. I never questioned it. After all, it was their time. I simply replied, "Okay, have a safe trip." He sent a "Merry Christmas, I love you," with a heart emoji. I didn't reply. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the sofa. I sat on the living room sofa in the dark and let the anger grow, because I realized one thing in that moment. The crying was over. There was no more room for pain, sadness, or tears. There was only room for strategy. They thought I was an idiot, that I would always be the orphaned girl, lost, grateful to have a family, who would trust eternally, sign any paper, and never question anything. They were wrong. I had grown up. I became a project manager because I was good at planning, organizing, anticipating problems, and creating solutions. I coordinated teams, managed crises, and made tough decisions every day. And in that moment, sitting in the darkness of my living room, I made the most important decision of my life. They wanted to play? We'd play, but this time by my rules. I stayed awake all night. I didn't sleep. I just planned. First, I made a mental list of everything I knew. Silas was cheating on me with his ex-girlfriend, Marielle. Marielle was pregnant. His entire family and friends knew and supported it. The power of attorney was the final piece of a plan to transfer my assets to his family. I hadn't signed anything yet. This last point was crucial. I still had control of everything. I was still the owner of my properties and my accounts. Silas had no legal power over anything. As long as I didn't sign that document, he couldn't do a thing. I spent all of Christmas planning, thinking about every detail, every move I would have to make. I made mental lists, mapped out strategies, and anticipated problems. That's how I worked as a project manager, and that's how I was going to handle this too. The next day, December 26th, I would put it all into action. When the sun came up, I knew exactly what my first step would be. At 9 in the morning, I called the attorney who had handled my parents' affairs. He had always told me that if I ever needed anything, all I had to do was call. Dr. Jackson, this is Zuri Sterling, James and Eleanor Sterling's daughter. I need to speak with you urgently. He must have heard something in my voice because he didn't ask questions. He just said, "Come to my office." I showered, got dressed, grabbed all the documents I had for the properties and the power of attorney that Silas had given me, and headed out. Dr. Jackson's office was downtown in an old red brick building. I had climbed those stairs since I was a child, always accompanied by my father. It was a place that smelled of old paper and strong coffee. He greeted me with a hug. He was a man in his 70s with completely white hair and reading glasses hanging from his neck. He had been my father's lawyer for over 20 years. "Sit down, Zuri. Tell me what happened." I told him everything. The announcement at the party, the power of attorney, the suspicion about the asset transfer. I spoke nonstop for almost 40 minutes. He listened in silence, taking notes, frowning at certain points. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Zuri, I have to tell you something." My heart sped up. "What?" "Your father and Kwesi were partners in a business many years ago, an import company. It started off very well, but then it started to struggle. Kwesi wanted to withdraw and sell his share. Your father bought his stake for a fair price. He took all the risk. Kwesi took the money and left." He paused, taking a sip of coffee. 2 years later, your father managed to turn the situation around. The company grew exponentially. That's how your family became wealthy. But I believe Kwesi never got over it. Your father told me this story years ago. From what he said, Kwesi had accepted it well at the time. The families remained friends. The children grew up together. But now, seeing what's happening, I think there was always resentment there. Kwesi and Nyala probably always looked at your family's life with bitterness. The class difference became very obvious over the years, right? You had everything, and they struggled financially. And when your parents died, you were a vulnerable teenager with a substantial inheritance. To resentful people, it must have looked like an opportunity. He looked at me seriously. Looking back now, with everything you've told me, it's clear that the friendship always had a fragile foundation. The resentment over the business sale was likely never truly overcome. And you, Zuri, became the perfect target. I felt as if a bucket of cold water had been dumped over me. So that was it. The resentment had always been hidden, and I never realized it. No one realized it. Zuri, your father certainly didn't suspect anything, or he would have taken precautions. I closed my eyes. My parents never imagined that friendship concealed so much envy, so much greed, and now I was paying the price for all of our naivety. "And this power of attorney?" I asked, pushing the document across the table. Dr. Jackson put on his glasses and read it carefully. It took him almost 15 minutes. He flipped pages, reread sections, and made notes. Finally, he placed the paper on the table and looked at me seriously. "This gives Silas full power over absolutely everything you own. He could sell the properties, transfer them, create mortgages, apply for loans in your name, everything. With this document signed, you would lose total control of your assets." I felt the anger surge again. And if I had already signed it? It would be very difficult to reverse. It would take years of legal proceedings, and even then, there would be no guarantees. The best-case scenario would be proving coercion or fraud, but that's extremely complicated in marital cases. And the properties? If we divorce, is he entitled to half? Dr. Jackson smiled for the first time since I had arrived. "No, Everything you inherited is separate property. By law, inheritances received before or during the marriage do not enter into marital property. If you divorce today, Silas gets nothing, absolutely nothing. Not unless you voluntarily transfer the assets into his name. That's why the power of attorney, I murmured. Exactly. It was the only legal way for them to get what they wanted. I opened the folder I had brought and placed all the rental contracts on the table. I need you to review this. Silas has been managing my properties for years. He says he reinvests the money, but I've never seen any real proof. I want to know where that money is going. Dr. Jackson spent the next 2 hours analyzing every document, every contract, and every bank statement I had. He made calls, verified records, and cross-referenced information. When he finished, his expression was somber. Zuri, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but the rental money is being deposited into Silas's personal accounts, not joint or business accounts. He is appropriating all the income from your properties. I took a deep breath. I expected it, but hearing the confirmation still hurt. And there's more, he continued. One of the condos has no proof of rent payment. There's a lease agreement, but no financial transaction records. Someone is living there for free. Marielle, I replied. His mistress. Dr. Jackson nodded. Most likely. I was silent for a moment, processing everything. What do I do now? First, do not sign that power of attorney under any circumstances. Second, regain control of your properties. Third, if you really want to get to the bottom of this, we can hire a private investigator and find out where that money has gone. Let's hire a detective, I said without hesitation. I want everything documented. I want proof, and I want them gone. He smiled. It was a sad smile, but it had a spark of pride. Your father would be very proud of the woman you've become. In the following days, I acted quickly and silently. Following Dr. Jackson's instructions, I hired a trusted real estate management company to take over the administration of my condos. I signed contracts, granted specific and limited powers, very different from the general power Silas wanted, and instructed that all tenants be notified immediately. Starting in January, all rent was to be paid directly to the management company. New leases would be issued. They had 1 week to sign, or eviction proceedings would begin. I also called a security company and installed discreet, small, almost invisible cameras throughout the house, strategically placed in the living room, kitchen, office, and patio. All with audio, all connected to an app on my cell phone to gather more evidence against them. Silas returned from the trip on January 6th. I was home when he arrived, surrounded by suitcases. "How was your trip, babe? How was New Year's?" he asked, giving me a kiss on the cheek, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't spent almost 2 weeks with his pregnant mistress and the family who was conspiring against me. "Quiet. I worked quite a bit. Got ahead on some projects," I lied. "Did you have time to look over that document?" There it was, the question I knew was coming. I smiled. "Oh, yes. Actually, honey, you don't have to worry about that anymore. I've already resolved everything." I saw his expression change. "What do you mean you resolved it?" "I hired a real estate management company to take care of the condos. This way you can focus entirely on your trading without worrying about the hassle of managing leases, contracts, and all that bureaucratic stuff. I thought you'd be happy. You'll have more time to invest in your work." The silence that followed was deafening. Silas blinked several times, as if processing too much information at once. "But I liked handling the properties. There's no need to pay someone to do a job I can do myself." I maintained the smile. "I know, darling, but you always say you want to grow as a trader, that you need more time to study the market. Now you have that time. Aren't you pleased?" I saw the panic in his eyes. He opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. "Yes, I'm pleased," he finally said. "It's just that it was a little sudden." "Ah, you know me. When I decide something, I make it happen fast. I knew you'd like the surprise, honey." He didn't reply, just forced a smile. He grabbed his phone and left the living room, mumbling something I didn't catch. I waited a moment and opened the camera app on my phone. I activated the patio camera and put on my earbuds. There he was, pacing nervously back and forth, furiously typing on his cell phone. His phone rang a few seconds later. Even from a distance, I could hear the shouting on the other end of the line. Calm down, Silas said, looking back nervously to make sure I wasn't near. I don't know what happened. She hired a management company. No, I can't do anything now. No, I don't have $3,000 to pay the rent, Marielle. Listen, I'm not going to have money for anything for a while. I need to sort this out first. He hung up the phone, radiating rage. I turned off the camera and smiled. His desperation was almost palpable. But I wasn't finished yet. That night, during dinner, I casually mentioned, "Oh, my boss called me a little while ago. I have to make a last-minute trip to Dubai, an important contract. They need someone to go and close the deal in person. I'll be gone all week." "When are you leaving?" Silas asked, trying to sound disinterested, but his eyes were sharp. "The flight is scheduled for 2 a.m. I'll leave the house around 11 or so. Sorry for the late notice. You know how this job is." "It's fine," he replied, too quickly. "I thought we'd spend some time together, but if it's for work, you have to go." After dinner, I went to the walk-in closet and grabbed my jewelry box to put it in the safe. That's when I noticed. Jewelry was missing. Several pieces. A pearl necklace that belonged to my grandmother, diamond earrings my parents had given me for my sweet 16, a gold bracelet with precious stone charms from my mother, and a sapphire necklace my father had given my mother for an anniversary. My blood boiled. It wasn't enough to steal my income. He had stolen my family's memories. But I didn't have time to deal with that now. I went into the office, opened the safe where I kept all the important documents, and changed the combination. I stored the remaining jewelry, locked it, and left. I packed a suitcase and said goodbye to Silas with a kiss on the cheek. Just to mess with him, I subtly grabbed his car keys from the table in the entryway, put them in my purse, and left the house. I didn't go to the airport. I went to a hotel downtown. I booked a comfortable suite, went up to the room, and finally took a deep breath. I was alone, safe, and in total control of the situation. An hour after leaving the house, my phone rang. "Hey, do you know where my car keys are?" I feigned surprise. "I don't know, honey, but why do you need the keys at this hour?" "Oh, nothing. I just noticed they weren't here on the table." I interrupted him. "Maybe they fell behind the furniture? Did you look closely?" I heard a sigh of irritation on the other end. "I'll take a look. Have a good trip. I love you." I hung up and immediately opened the camera app. The sight of Silas rummaging through the entire house, looking for the keys that were tucked away in my purse, was almost comical. He looked under the sofa, searched drawers, and even crouched down to look under the furniture. After 15 minutes of frustrated searching, he grabbed his phone, typed something quickly, and threw himself onto the living room sofa with the expression of someone who had just realized he had completely lost control. I smiled alone in the hotel room, but the night wasn't over yet. Half an hour later, my phone notified me that someone was at the front door. I activated the camera and saw 3 people entering the condo. Uncle Kwesi, Auntie Nyala, and Marielle sat down at the kitchen table. Silas looked devastated, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. Auntie Nyala was visibly irritated, her arms crossed in a harsh expression. Uncle Kwesi tapped his fingers impatiently on the table. I turned the audio volume up to the maximum and put on my earbuds. "Tell us clearly what's happening," Auntie Nyala demanded in a cutting voice. Silas ran his hand tiredly over his face. "She hired a management company to administer the condos. All the tenants have received a notice. Starting this month, the rent goes straight to the management company. New leases, everything official. I no longer have access to anything." "And Marielle's condo?" Uncle Kwesi asked. "She also received the notice. New lease in 1 week or eviction." Marielle placed a protective hand on her belly. "Silas, I don't have the money to pay the rent. You know that." "I know," Silas replied in a defeated voice. "You'll have to live with my parents for now until I resolve this situation." "Resolve? How?" Uncle Kwesi practically spat. You lost control of everything. Years of planning, years of taking care of that girl, and you let it slip away at the last minute." "I didn't let it slip away," Silas retorted, raising his voice. "She suddenly got smart. She never questioned anything in 5 years of marriage. And out of nowhere, she decides to hire a management company." "Because you rushed it with that stupid power of attorney," Auntie Nyala said, pointing a finger at him. "You should have waited longer, earned more of her trust." "More trust? I've known her since she was born. If that's not enough trust, I don't know what is." "Clearly it wasn't," Uncle Quasey murmured. There was a tense silence. Marielle nervously fiddled with the necklace she was wearing, my sapphire necklace, rubbing the pendant between her fingers. "So, what now?" she asked in a weak voice. "What do we do, Silas?" He sighed. "I'm going to try to convince her to sign the power of attorney. It's the only way to reverse this. With the power, I can undo the contract with the management company and regain control." "But what are you going to tell her to make her sign it?" Uncle Quasey asked. "I don't know. I need to talk to her when she gets back from Dubai." Auntie Nyala leaned forward, hands on the table. "Silas, listen to me closely. We haven't looked after that child all these years just to end up with nothing. You understand? I didn't put up with that kid crying over her dead parents for free. Your father and I didn't make so many sacrifices just for it to go wrong now." My stomach turned. The way she spoke of me, as if I were a burden, an investment that had to yield profits. "I know, Mom," Silas said tiredly. "Do you really know?" Uncle Quasey joined his wife. "That company should have been ours, too. Half of that money, half of those condos, it should all be ours. But her father got greedy and bought out my share when the company was struggling. He kept all the profits when it got better, he swindled us, and then he died, leaving everything to that spoiled little girl." Auntie Nyala shifted in her chair and continued. "She grew up in the best schools. She had everything she wanted. She never worked a hard day in her life. Meanwhile, we were busting our butts, your father at that miserable store, me at that practice, watching them from afar with that life of luxury that should have been ours, too." Uncle Quasey nodded. "That's why, when they died, it was our opportunity, our chance to correct that injustice. We cared for the girl, earned her trust, and when she turned 21, we were so close that she saw us as her family. And it worked. She let us live in her house. She trusted you to manage the condos. She married you. Everything was perfect until you messed it all up," Auntie Nyala finished, looking at Silas with contempt. "I didn't mess up anything." Silas slammed his hand on the table. "The plan was to wait for her to sign the power, transfer everything to my name, and then file for divorce. And that's it. Done. Each goes their separate way. But she didn't sign it." "Not yet, but she will," Silas insisted. "How are you so sure?" Uncle Quasey doubted. Silas hesitated. I think so. I'll find a way. She trusts me." "Trusted," Auntie Nyala corrected. "After this management company business, I don't know. It looks like she suspects something." They fell silent for a few moments. I remained in the hotel room with a pounding heart, recording every second of the conversation. "What about us?" Marielle asked. "You said you don't have the rent money anymore. How are you going to support me? Support the baby?" Silas ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "I don't know, Marielle. I don't know. The money I had saved up, I used it to pay for the trip, and I lost the rest gambling online." "You lost it?" Auntie Nyala screamed. "Silas, you promised you'd stop." "I didn't know I'd be cut off from the rent money this month. If I had known, I wouldn't have bet at all." "You're a damn fool," Uncle Quasey said bluntly. "A screw-up. And now, how are we going to pay this month's bills?" "I'm going to fix it," Silas insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Marielle started to cry. "You promised I wouldn't have to worry about money. I quit my job. I fought with my parents. I left home. You promised you'd take care of me, that we'd have a good life, that the baby would have everything, and now you tell me you have no money, that you lost it all gambling?" "Marielle, please!" "No!" She stood up from the chair. I can't believe I was so stupid. All these years, being the other woman, hiding, waiting, and for what? To end up pregnant, homeless, depending on your parents' charity? Calm down, Marielle, Auntie Nyala said, but without much sympathy. We'll resolve this, and when we get the money, we'll all benefit. You, the baby, everyone. But you have to be patient. Patient? Marielle laughed without humor. I'm 4 months pregnant, Nyala. In 5 months, I'll have a baby. I don't have time to be patient. Well, you should have thought of that before you got pregnant, Auntie Nyala retorted coldly. Have you never heard of birth control or condoms? The silence that followed was charged with tension. Finally, Uncle Kwesi broke it. We need a new plan. If Zuri isn't going to sign the power willingly, we'll have to force her somehow. Force her how? Silas asked. I don't know. Blackmail, threats, something that leaves her no choice. Blackmail with what? Marielle asked. She has nothing to hide. Her life is perfect, clean, straight. Everyone has something, Uncle Kwesi muttered. We just have to find it. Auntie Nyala nodded thoughtfully. Or we create something. We plant some evidence, something that compromises her. Then we offer to fix it in exchange for the signature. I felt nauseous. They were actually considering framing me with something false just to get my signature. That's too risky, Silas said. More risky than losing everything, Uncle Kwesi countered. They spent a few more minutes discussing possibilities, each more absurd than the last. Finally, they decided to think about it more and meet again in a few days. When they finally left, it was almost 3 a.m. I turned off the camera, my hands trembling. It wasn't just a financial scam. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a conspiracy that had lasted for over a decade. Since my parents' death, perhaps even before, they had planned everything. Every gesture of affection, every word of comfort, every family moment. It had all been calculated, measured, executed with precision, and I had believed all of it. At 7 a.m, I picked up the phone and called Dr. Jackson. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was sleepy, but he became alert when he recognized my voice. Zuri, what happened? I have everything recorded, the full confession. They admitted the marriage was a scam from the beginning, that they only cared for me to gain access to the inheritance, and that now they're planning to blackmail or frame me to force me to sign the power of attorney. There was silence on the other end. Are you safe? Yes, I'm at a hotel. They don't know where I am. Send me the recordings right now and come to my office this afternoon. We're going to end this once and for all. I was in Dr. Jackson's office by 2 p.m. He had already seen the main recordings. His face was serious, his jaw tight. Zuri, this is much worse than we imagined, he began, opening a thick folder on the table. But it's also much better for your case. How? The private investigator I hired finished the investigation. We have concrete proof of everything. He turned his laptop toward me. The rent money was diverted to Silas's personal account for 5 years. Bank statements show excessive spending on online gambling, casinos, and betting sites. Silas is a gambling addict. My stomach turned, but it wasn't a surprise. I had figured that out the night before. There's more, he continued, opening another tab. The trips to the Caribbean were all a lie. The detective obtained records of the flight and hotel reservations in their names. Every year, the 4 of them went to a luxury resort: Silas, Marielle, Uncle Kwesi, and Auntie Nyala. Plane tickets, 5-star hotels, everything paid for with cards linked to the account where your rent money was deposited. He showed me the documents, reservation confirmations, credit card statements, plane tickets, all in their names, all paid for with my money. The dates coincided perfectly, between December 25th and January 6th for each of the last 5 years. While I stayed in Atlanta working, believing they were visiting relatives in the Caribbean, they were living it up with my money. What do we do now? He leaned back in his chair with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Now, we legally destroy them. Immediate divorce on the grounds of adultery and fraud. With this evidence, Silas doesn't get a dime. We evict Kwesi and Nyala from your house. We file a civil suit for embezzlement for all the diverted money, a theft charge for the jewelry, and we can even consider criminal charges. Let's do it, I replied without hesitation. Excellent. I'll start preparing all the documentation. Everything will be ready to file in court tomorrow. I spent 3 days in the hotel, monitoring their every move through the cameras. Silas and Marielle were becoming more comfortable in my condo. She had practically moved in, her things scattered around the house. They behaved like a couple in every corner. The living room, the kitchen, my bedroom. Every space profaned by their betrayal. On the third day, while watching another deplorable scene through the living room camera, I had an idea. I already had all the evidence I needed, but there was something I wanted to see in person, something that had to happen to make my plan even better. I needed to catch Silas in the act, and I needed Auntie Nyala and Uncle Kwesi to find out about it from me. I waited for the right moment. On my phone screen, I saw Silas and Marielle settling onto the living room sofa, drinking wine, and laughing at something on his phone. They were completely relaxed. Perfect. I grabbed my keys and left the hotel. My condo was 10 minutes away. Throughout the drive, my heart beat fast, not from nervousness, but from a strange mix of rage and anticipated satisfaction. I parked in the building's garage. I took the elevator up. I walked down the hall to my door. I took a deep breath. I glanced at my phone one last time to make sure the moment was opportune, and I opened the door. The scene I found was exactly what I expected, but seeing it in person was different from watching it on a screen. Silas and Marielle were on the sofa. She was sitting on his lap, wearing one of my silk nightgowns. They were kissing, his hands running over her body with the familiarity of someone who had been doing it for years. The sound of the door opening made them jump apart immediately. Silas turned his head and went white, literally white. All the blood drained from his face in 2 seconds. "Zuri!" he shouted, pushing Marielle aside and leaping up. "Dubai! You shouldn't be—" Marielle covered herself with a blanket, her eyes wide with panic. I stood in the doorway, watching both of them. I didn't say anything. I just observed. "Zuri, please, let me explain," Silas started, taking steps toward me. "This isn't what it looks like. Marielle she needed a place to stay." "I want a divorce." I cut him off. My voice came out firmer and calmer than I expected. He stopped, blinking several times. "What? Divorce. You cheated on me in our condo with your ex-girlfriend. Of course, I want a divorce." I watched the panic in his eyes be replaced by something more calculating. He was thinking, processing, trying to find a way out. "Zuri, let's talk calmly," he began, changing his strategy to a softer voice. "You're angry. I understand, but there's nothing to talk about. I want you out of my condo now." Marielle stood up, still holding the blanket. "I'm so sorry, Zuri." "Shut up," I told her without looking at her. "You don't owe me an apology. You don't owe me anything. Just get out of my house." Silas took a step forward, and for the first time, I saw something dangerous in his eyes, an arrogance he had always hidden well. "You won't be able to prove the cheating," he said, in a low but firm voice. "And even if you do, you'll have to pay me alimony and give me half of your assets, including this condo. Good luck with the divorce, Zuri." I smiled. I couldn't help it. A small but genuine smile. "We'll see," I simply replied, and I left. I heard Silas calling my name in the hallway, but I didn't look back. I got into the elevator, the doors closed, and finally, I let the smile grow. He really thought I had no proof, that I had discovered it by chance at that exact moment, that I was stupid enough not to know that my inheritance was separate property. Back in the car, I picked up my phone and dialed Auntie Nyala's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Zuri, honey, how's Dubai?" I let my voice tremble as if I were crying. "Auntie, I came back early and I caught Silas with another woman." Silence on the other end. "What?" she finally said, and from her tone, I realized the surprise was genuine. What do you mean, with another woman? Where? In our condo, I replied, putting all the pain I could into my voice. She was there. They were together, and she's pregnant, Auntie Nyala. Oh my God, she murmured. I heard her take a deep breath. I don't know what to do, I continued, letting my voice crack. How could he do this to me? Zuri, honey, where are you? Auntie Nyala asked. There was something in her voice. Was it concern or calculation? I'm in my car, in the building's garage. I can't go back to that condo, not now. I have to call a lawyer. I'm going to file for divorce. Zuri, you don't have to be so drastic. Let's talk. Maybe we can— He cheated on me, Auntie Nyala. I cut her off, putting firmness in my voice. In our condo. There's no conversation that can fix this. You're right, she said after a moment. You're absolutely right. Leave it to me. I'm going to talk to him. That boy is going to hear it. I hung up and allowed myself to smile again. Now all that was left was to wait for the show to begin. It didn't take a minute. Through the camera app, I saw Silas's phone ring. He looked at the screen and his face became even paler. It's my mother, he told Marielle, who was picking up her things scattered around the house. He answered and immediately held the phone away from his ear. Even through the camera, I could hear Auntie Nyala screaming, Are you an idiot or just playing dumb? How could you let her catch you in the condo with Marielle? Can't you think with your upper head for 5 seconds? Mom, calm down. Can I explain? Silas tried to respond, but she wouldn't let him. Explain what? Years, Silas. Years of planning. Years of caring for that girl, earning her trust, building everything brick by brick, and you mess it all up because you couldn't keep your pants on? I had never heard Auntie Nyala scream like that. The mask of the educated, kind woman had completely dropped. I'm going to fix it, Silas tried to say, but his voice was weak. Fix it? How are you going to fix it? She's going to file for divorce. She has no proof. She won't be able to prove adultery. She caught you in the condo with your pregnant mistress, you fool! What clearer proof do you need? I heard Uncle Kwesi's voice. Auntie Nyala must have put him on speakerphone because his voice was clearly audible. You are an idiot, Uncle Kwesi said with a chilling calm that was worse than his wife's screaming. A complete and utter idiot. We trusted you. We gave you one task: marry her, earn her trust, get her to sign the power, and you couldn't even do that. I tried. She wouldn't sign. But I'll make her drop the divorce, Silas insisted, desperation in his voice. I'll talk to her. I'll apologize. How? Uncle Kwesi asked, still with that terrifying calm. How are you going to get a woman who just caught you cheating to drop the divorce? What arguments do you have? Silence. That's what I thought, Uncle Kwesi continued. You have nothing. We've lost everything because of you. We haven't lost it yet, Silas argued, but without conviction. She'll still have to give me half the assets in the divorce. Even if there was cheating, it's divided. Auntie Nyala let out a bitter laugh. You really are stupid. Those properties are an inheritance. They don't go into the division. She's going to divorce you. You'll be left with nothing, and on top of that, you'll have a pregnant mistress to support. Congratulations, Silas. You managed to mess up everything. I watched Silas sink heavily onto the sofa, the phone still to his ear, his face in his hands. Can you two come over here? He asked in a weak voice. We have to do something. We need a plan. No, Auntie Nyala said curtly. You got yourself into this mess alone. Now get yourself out alone. I'm fed up, Silas, fed up with you, fed up with this whole situation. And she hung up. Silas sat there, staring at the phone for almost 5 minutes. Marielle tried to approach him, but he pushed her away. You have to leave, he told her. Go, Marielle, now, and don't come back. But, Silas, I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem now, he screamed, standing up. Go to your parents' house. Go wherever you want, but get out of here. I saw Marielle start crying, hastily gathering her things, and running out of the condo almost in a rush. Silas was left alone in the living room, pacing back and forth, grabbing his phone, typing something, deleting it, and typing again. He was sending me messages. I saw the notifications arrive on my phone. Zuri, please let me explain. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. I felt lonely. You've been gone a lot. I love you. I've always loved you. Can we please fix this?" I deleted all the messages without responding. I turned off the cameras and leaned back in the car seat. Phase 1 completed. Now all that was left was to wait for tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up early. I had already asked Dr. Jackson to prepare everything to be served that very day. At 8 a.m. sharp, 2 process servers split up. One went to the house where Uncle Kwesi and Auntie Nyala lived. The other went to my condo, where Silas was staying. I was in Dr. Jackson's office when my phone rang. It was Auntie Nyala. I answered. "Zuri!" she screamed. There was panic in her voice now, none of yesterday's suppressed rage, pure panic. "What is this? An eviction notice? You're kicking us out!" "Yes," I replied simply. "But why? What have we done?" She tried to bluff. "Zuri, please, you can't do this. We're elderly. We don't have the money for—" "That's not my problem," I cut her off, using the exact words Silas had used with Marielle the day before. "It's because of what Silas did, but we have nothing to do with that," she almost cried. "Of course we don't. We're just as surprised as you are, that idiot boy." "Auntie Nyala," I interrupted, my voice turning cold. "I know everything. The trips that weren't to the Caribbean, the diverted rent money, the plan you had since my parents' death. I know everything." Absolute silence on the other end. "So, yes," I continued, "you have 30 days to leave my house, and I suggest you use that time to find a good lawyer because you're going to need one." I hung up before she could reply. 2 minutes later, my phone rang again. Silas. I answered. "Zuri, is this serious?" he asked. There was something different in his voice. Fear. "Divorce? Embezzlement? Theft? Are you suing me?" "Yes." "But why those accusations? You don't have proof of all that, do you?" "Yes, I do." "What proof? How—" "There are security cameras all over the condo, Silas, with audio installed days ago. I have the recording of you and Marielle. I have the recording of the meeting in the kitchen where you all confessed the entire plan. I have documents that prove the money diversions, the fake trips, everything." Silence. "You recorded us," he finally managed to say. "I recorded you, and I've turned everything over to the authorities." "But that's illegal. You can't record people without their consent." "Yes, I can. In my condo with my security cameras. It's perfectly legal." I heard him breathe heavily on the other end. "How much do you want?" he finally asked. "How much do you want to forget everything? To withdraw the lawsuits? $10,000? $20,000? How much?" This time I laughed. I really laughed. "Silas, do you really think I want money? I have money. What I want is justice and my assets back." "Your assets have never stopped being yours." "No. And the $200,000 you diverted from the rent over 5 years? And my jewelry you stole and gave to your mistress? And the years of lies? I'll give it all back to you with interest. Just withdraw the lawsuits." "No. You have nowhere to lay your head. How do you think you're going to give it back to me with interest? Zuri, please, this is going to destroy me. It's going to destroy my parents, all of us." "You should have thought of that before. Are you doing this for revenge? Because I cheated on you? I already apologized." "No, Silas. I'm doing this because you spent over a decade planning a scam against me. Because you used my parents' death. You used my vulnerability and my trust. Because you are exactly the type of people who deserve to pay for their crimes." "Crimes? I just made bad decisions with our money. It's the risk of the business. You diverted money, falsified contracts, stole jewelry, committed fraud. Those are felonies, Silas, and you are going to answer for them." I heard him start to cry on the other end. Not the manipulative cry he would probably use if we were face to face. It was a cry of genuine desperation. "Please," he begged. "I'm going to lose everything. I'll have nothing." "Welcome to the club," I replied coldly. "You were going to leave me with nothing, too. The difference is I was smarter and found out earlier." I heard him swallow on the other end. "My parents," he started, but his voice failed him. My parents are going to kill me. They're going to kill me for letting this happen. That's not my problem. Don't you understand? His voice became desperate. They're going to blame me for everything. They'll say I messed up their plan, that I was stupid, careless. And weren't you? I cut him off. You were stupid and careless. You let yourself get caught with your mistress. I didn't know you'd come back early. I'm not just talking about that day, Silas. I'm also talking about Christmas Eve. When you announced Marielle's pregnancy to the whole room, when your parents talked about finally getting the properties they thought they were entitled to, when you all toasted to the future. Absolute silence on the other end. You were there? His voice was a thread. Yes. I also arrived early from the company party. I heard everything, saw everything, and left before anyone realized. But you texted me afterward, saying you were at the company party. Because I needed time, Silas. Time to process, time to plan, time to gather evidence. You all thought I'd be eternally idiotic, eternally grateful, eternally blind. And I let you believe it while I prepared. Another silence, longer and heavier. So, since Christmas, he murmured as if processing it. You knew since Christmas. The trip to Dubai, the cameras, everything was planned. Yes, but you destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure you pay the consequences. And I hung up. I looked at Dr. Jackson, who had followed the entire conversation. How do you feel? He asked. I thought for a moment. Free, I finally replied. I feel free. He smiled. Your father would be proud. It took 2 months for everything to be resolved. The divorce was fast because Silas had no way to fight. With all the evidence, his lawyer basically begged him to sign everything without opposing it. It's the only way out, I heard the man say in the courthouse hallway. I watched Silas sign the papers. His hand trembled so much that the pen almost fell. He couldn't meet my eyes once. I left there officially divorced, officially the owner of everything that had always been mine. The judgment for embezzlement arrived shortly after. $260,000 to be repaid, plus the jewelry. The judge mandated a 30% garnishment of his wages. Except Silas had never had a paycheck. He had never truly worked in his life. I suggest the defendant get a real job, the prosecutor said, almost laughing. And that's what happened. A few weeks later, Dr. Jackson told me Silas had finally gotten a job, a server at a soul food diner in downtown Atlanta. For the first time in his adult life, he was working for real, getting up early, wearing a uniform, waiting on customers, cleaning tables. The same man who spent his days pretending to study charts in front of the computer, who lectured me about strategic investments, was now finally doing something productive. Uncle Kwesi and Auntie Nyala had 30 days to get out of the house. On the last day, I went to conduct the inspection with the process server. I expected it to be messy. I didn't expect complete vandalism, broken furniture, holes in the walls, spray paint with insults, shattered mirrors on the floor. They had destroyed everything they could before leaving. Uncle Kwesi was waiting for me at the door, glaring. Satisfied? No, I replied clearly, but I will be. And this damage? We have nowhere to go. Auntie Nyala appeared behind him crying. We're elderly, we have no money, you took everything from us. I took what was always mine. You are the ones who spent years pretending it was yours. Your father robbed us. Uncle Kwesi took a step toward me, but the officer stepped between us. That money was ours. My father bought your share. You chose to leave. It wasn't his fault that you gave up too soon, and it's certainly not mine. You'll regret this, Auntie Nyala hissed. I won't, but you both will, every single day. I turned and left. I had the entire house renovated. It took over a month, but it looked beautiful. I sold it in 2 weeks to a black couple with 2 small children. They were beaming, making plans about how they would decorate each room, about the cookouts they would have in the backyard. I hope they're happy there. That house deserved good stories. I sold the condo I lived in with Silas too. I didn't even go back inside. I couldn't have. I hired people to empty everything, renovate it, and sold it furnished to an investor who didn't even want to see it in person. Of the 5 properties I inherited, I only kept the 3 condos that had always been rented out. I left everything in the hands of the management company. The monthly income was more than enough for me to live well, and I had the money from the sales invested. Through mutual friends, I kept up with the news. Silas and Marielle broke up. She never forgave him for kicking her out that pregnant night with nowhere to go. The humiliation, the desperation, the coldness with which he sent her out into the street, all of that killed whatever existed between them. Marielle made amends with her parents and moved back home. They welcomed her with open arms, happy to have their daughter back and the grandchild on the way, even under the most difficult circumstances. Silas, on the other hand, was completely alone. He had cut ties with his parents after everything that happened. The accusations, the screaming, the insults they exchanged when they realized they had lost everything. There was no coming back from that. Kwesi and Niala never even got to meet their grandson. Silas rented a room in a shared apartment in a bad neighborhood. He worked at the diner, returning every day to an empty room. He slept alone, no Marielle, no son, no parents, no anything. Kwesi and Niala were in a tiny apartment on the other side of town. Kwesi went back to doing construction side jobs, despite his age and beaten-up body. Niala found work as a secretary at a pet store, earning minimum wage. The family that had planned everything so carefully was shattered. Separated, alone, bitter, each one blaming the other for the disaster they had created. 3 months after the divorce, I packed my bags and left Atlanta. I had no reason to stay there anymore. I chose Charleston, South Carolina, because it was close enough not to be dramatic, but far enough to be a true new beginning. I bought a small 2-bedroom home with a front garden. Nothing luxurious, nothing over the top. I painted the walls the colors I liked. I hung photos of my parents. I planted roses in the garden because my mother loved roses, and hydrangeas because my father said they were the most beautiful. Waking up early and tending to the garden became my favorite routine. Watering, pruning, watching things grow. A slightly obvious metaphor, I know, but it calmed me. Little by little, I started meeting people. The neighbor who makes incredible sweet potato pie and always shows up with a fresh batch when she realizes I'm home. The owner of the coffee shop on the corner, who already knows my order by heart. A group that meets to walk on the beach every morning. People who knew me as Zuri, the one who moved from Atlanta and likes gardening. Not as Zuri, the one who was almost destroyed by those who claimed to be her family. It felt good to be just myself, without baggage, without explanations. I left my job in Atlanta. The firm was upset. They offered me a raise, a promotion, anything to make me stay. But I needed distance from everything. I continued to work as a consultant for them, but now remotely, on specific projects when I wanted, how I wanted, nothing that consumed me. I traveled quite a bit. France, Italy, Japan, this time for real, exploring the places, trying the cuisine of each country, and taking photos. Dr. Jackson calls me every month, always on the same day, at the same time. He tells me silly things about his office, asks how I am, and sometimes updates me on a legal matter. Silas tried to appeal the garnishment again, he told me the other day. The judge denied it. It's the 5th time now. We laughed. He is the closest person to family I have today, and yet there's a part of me that doesn't completely open up to him, that maintains that safe distance. 3 years have passed since that Christmas Eve. I wake up every day in my home in Charleston. I make coffee. I sit on the porch looking at the garden. The roses are gorgeous, the hydrangeas too. I haven't seriously dated anyone in these 3 years. I've been out with a few people, had nice dinners, good conversations, but nothing went past 3 or 4 dates. Last month, a very nice guy, the brother of a friend from the walking group, tried to hold my hand. We had been out 3 times. It was going well. I pulled away without thinking. Pure instinct. "I'm sorry," I told him. "I'm not ready yet." He was super understanding. "No pressure. We'll go at your pace." 2 weeks later, he stopped calling. I don't blame him. No one wants to wait for someone who might never be ready. And maybe I never will be. Because when you spend years believing you have a family, trusting with your eyes closed, and you discover that everything was a giant lie from the first day, something breaks inside you. Now I look at everyone a little sideways, looking for the trick, the lie, the ulterior motive. It's exhausting. It's lonely. But it keeps me safe. Sometimes I wonder if it's fair to myself, to the people who cross my path, to carry this trauma like armor against everyone. But then I remember trusting blindly, never doubting, and the price I almost paid. And then I think, okay, maybe it's lonely, but it's safe. And after everything, safety is worth more. What I've learned is that being alone doesn't mean being empty. I fill myself with other things. The books I read on the porch, the trips I take, the garden I plant, the house I decorate to my taste, the friends I've chosen to keep close, though always at that prudent distance. This morning, drinking coffee on the porch with a bird singing in the garden tree, I realized one thing. I'm happy. Not in the way I imagined when I was younger. No husband, no children, no picture-perfect life. But I'm happy in my own way, on my own time, on my own terms. Maybe someday I'll trust someone again. Maybe not. And it's okay if that day never comes, because the real inheritance my parents left me wasn't the money or the properties. It was the ability to always get back up, no matter how many times I'm knocked down. And no one can take that from me. I finish my coffee, look at the flowers, feel the breeze, and smile. Because today I choose to keep going, and that is enough. And that's all, folks. That was my story. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story resonated with you in any way, please leave a like below. That really helps the channel grow and reach more people who need to hear stories like this. Subscribe to the channel too and ring the bell because there are many more stories on the way. And tell me in the comments, would you have done anything differently? Would you have confronted them earlier? Or would you have waited for the right moment like I did? I read all the comments, sending a huge hug to your heart, and until the next one. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.